One late afternoon, Ethan was taking his usual walk through the forest. He suddenly spotted a large bear sitting quietly in the middle of the trail, its head lowered, and it seemed like it was crying. Fear and confusion overwhelmed him, but strangely, the bear didn't act aggressively. It just looked at him with eyes that seemed to be begging for help. Ethan froze, unable to move, despite every instinct telling him to run. But he couldn't look away from the bear's gaze. The bear seemed to be waiting for something. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. It was late afternoon and the sun was already slowly slipping behind the trees of the tranquil forest. Ethan was used to walking there after a long day at work, but that night something was different. There was an unusual silence, almost as if the forest itself was waiting for something. His heart began to beat faster when, in the middle of the trail, he spotted an imposing figure among the trees. It was a bear, but no ordinary bear. The animal was sitting with its back to Ethan, its head down, as if it was crying. The muffled sound coming from the bear was unmistakable. Ethan froze, cold sweat running down his back. He knew bears were dangerous, especially so close at dusk, but this one's behavior was unlike anything he had ever heard of. The bear didn't run away, nor did it show any signs of aggression. Instead, it raised its head and looked straight into Ethan's eyes. Its eyes, which should have conveyed danger, were begging for something. It was as if the bear was asking for help. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, the strangeness of the situation suffocating him. He should run, get away and save himself, but something inside him prevented him from moving. The bear's gaze wouldn't let him. I have to get out of here. This is crazy, he thought, as his feet remained firmly on the ground. Every instinct told him to run, but he was paralyzed, too curious to leave it behind. Another wailing sound came from the animal, and Ethan's heart pounded even harder. Why is it crying? What happened here? He asked himself. The surrounding forest seemed to tighten. The air was thicker, and Ethan's decision at that moment would change everything. What should have been just another walk in the woods became the start of something he could never have imagined. Ethan stood still, trying to understand what was before his eyes. The bear didn't move with hostility. On the contrary, it seemed to be waiting. After a few seconds, the huge creature slowly stood up, as if it didn't want to frighten him, and took a few cautious steps towards Ethan. Fear made his body stiffen, but his feet still couldn't move. He didn't know whether to run or stay. Then something really strange happened. The bear, a few meters away from Ethan, stopped and turned its body, as if asking him to follow. The animal took one last look at the man before turning completely around and starting to walk in the opposite direction. Ethan was confused, increasingly immersed in the feeling that something bigger was coming. What am I doing? He muttered to himself, feeling the chill of the night settle in. But that bear, something about it was different, something Ethan couldn't ignore. It was as if the animal knew exactly what it was doing. Perhaps it was madness. Perhaps it was the call of something unknown, but he felt a sudden urge to follow it. Determined not to back down, Ethan started walking. With every step, the forest seemed denser. The shadows of the trees grew, creating frightening shapes around him. This is insane, he thought, but at the same time, he couldn't stop following the bear. His feet, once immobile, now seemed determined, as if they already knew the way before he had even made his choice. The bear looked back occasionally, as if making sure Ethan was keeping up. It was all very strange. In his mind, Ethan tried to understand what was going on. The risk of following a wild animal was real, and he knew it. But something in that look, in that wail, made him ignore all signs of danger. He felt an inexplicable confidence in it. As they walked, the air became colder and heavier. Night was falling fast, and what little light remained between the trees was fading. "Where are you taking me?" he asked quietly, knowing that he obviously wouldn't get an answer. But the bear, steadfast and silent, continued along the trail. Every second seemed more surreal. The journey had only just begun, and the destination that awaited them promised far greater revelations than Ethan could have imagined. The forest closed in around Ethan, The trees became denser and the path narrower. Following the bear silently, he began to feel the weight of the unknown, and the fear that had lain dormant rose again in his chest. With every step, he questioned his sanity. "Why am I doing this?" he muttered to himself as his breathing became heavier. The bear continued steadily ahead, not looking back now. The path he took seemed meticulously planned, dodging exposed roots and rocks that could be a trap for Ethan, as if he already knew every detail of that hostile terrain. The animal's confidence was growing in Ethan's heart, and even though his fear was growing, he felt it was the right thing to do. The dense forest became increasingly threatening. The noise of the surrounding fauna, the distant and strange sounds made Ethan alert, but the bear seemed to know exactly where it was going. Suddenly, their walk was interrupted by an unexpected obstacle. A river with a strong current stretched out in front of them, cutting off their path. Ethan stopped on the bank, observing the turbulent waters that seemed deeper than he had imagined. The moon, already high in the sky, illuminated the scene in an almost macabre way. The bear, however, didn't hesitate. He headed towards a makeshift bridge made of logs and vines that seemed about to give way. Ethan's heart raced. "I can't cross that," he thought, watching the bear approach the bridge with confidence. The sound of the current was deafening, and the fear of falling into those icy waters paralyzed him. The bear, however, crossed the bridge carefully, stopping on the other side and looking directly at Ethan. It was as if it was encouraging him to keep going. Ethan took a deep breath, the cold wind hitting his face. He knew that if he didn't follow the bear now, he would never know what awaited him on the other side. With trembling legs, he began to cross the bridge, his steps cautious and slow. The sound of the timbers creaking with each movement was a constant reminder that a single false step could be fatal. When he was almost halfway across, a gust of wind made the bridge sway violently. Ethan clung tightly to the vines, feeling the fear pulsing through his veins. The bear on the other side watched him patiently, as if it knew he would make it. With his heart pounding, Ethan finally reached the other shore. His feet touched solid ground, and he let out a sigh of relief. He looked at the bear, who just turned and kept walking. A mutual trust was beginning to form between them, an inexplicable connection. The walk continued, and Ethan knew that with each step, he was getting closer to discovering what this strange encounter really meant. The feeling of being on a journey deeper than he could comprehend surrounded him. The forest seemed to hide ancient secrets, and he wondered if he was ready for what was coming next. After crossing the river, Ethan felt his surroundings begin to change. The forest, once dense and almost suffocating, was beginning to make way for a clearing. The bear was still leading him with slow, calculated steps. The air seemed heavier, and the feeling that something was about to be revealed grew inside him. Little by little, rusty structures began to appear between the trees. Ethan tightened his pace, trying to understand what he was seeing ahead. When they finally reached the clearing, the sight made him stop instantly. In the heart of the forest, surrounded by ancient trees, was an abandoned circus. The faded colors of the tarpaulins swayed gently in the wind, while the fittings of the cages were corroded by rust. The place exuded an aura of abandonment and sadness. Giant cages were empty, with the exception of one or two still housing forgotten and mistreated animals, their skins thin and their gazes empty. Ethan couldn't believe his eyes. A circus. Here, he thought, his mind trying to process the strangeness of the place. The bear, however, continued walking towards the center of the circus. Ethan followed, trying to avoid the debris scattered across the floor. There were broken toys, pieces of wood, and twisted hardware. He passed an old Ferris wheel whose rusty chairs swayed in the wind, making an ominous sound. Something about the place disturbed him deeply. The marks of the past were everywhere, and Ethan felt that the bear was somehow linked to that desolate scene. Finally, the bear stopped in front of a large, empty cage. Ethan approached cautiously, feeling the heavy air around him. He crouched down and looked into the eyes of the bear, which seemed to be reliving something painful, something from its past. You've been here before, haven't you?" whispered Ethan, feeling a pang of sadness as he looked at the animal. With a slight movement of his head, the bear confirmed it. It was as if this place was more than just a scene of ruin. It was part of his history, a past he couldn't forget. Ethan then understood. The bear wasn't just a wild creature from the forest. He had been part of that circus, an imprisoned animal, forced to entertain and serve. The pain of that place was evident in his eyes. The connection between the two intensified. Ethan looked around and realized that other animals were still trapped in deplorable conditions, waiting for help that never came. The weight of the situation fell on Ethan's shoulders. He knew he couldn't just walk away and leave those animals suffering there. "I have to do something," he thought, pulling his cell phone out of his pocket. The signal was weak, almost non-existent, but he managed to send a quick message to the authorities asking for help before the signal disappeared completely. He knew he had to act fast. The bear had brought Ethan there for a reason, and now he understood. The history of that abandoned circus was about to change, and he was the key to that transformation. However, what he didn't know was that the arrival of help would bring to light secrets much deeper than he could have imagined. The air around Ethan seemed thicker as he explored the abandoned circus. The rusty fittings, broken toys, and forgotten animals gave the place a feeling of deep sadness. Every step Ethan took brought him closer to a greater revelation. He knew there was more to discover about the bear that now seemed to be carrying an invisible burden. He walked up to a large tent that had been partially destroyed by time. The faded curtains, which had once been vibrant and colorful, swayed gently in the wind. As he entered, Ethan could sense that this was the heart of the circus. In the center of the tent, there was a circular ring surrounded by crumbling seats. He looked around, trying to imagine what the place had been like in times gone by, full of life, noisy, and full of applause. It was then that he noticed the marks on the dirt floor, deep, jagged scratches, as if some animal had been forced to perform tricks repeatedly there. The bear entered the tent just behind him, and on seeing the track, stopped. Its eyes, which had once expressed strength, were now full of pain and memories. Ethan approached carefully, realizing that this was the crucial point in the bear's story. "You were part of it, weren't you?" Ethan whispered as he looked into the creature's large eyes. The bear bowed its head in silence, as if confirming Ethan's suspicions. The realization hit hard. This bear was not just a forest dweller. He was a victim of a cruel past, forced to entertain, to perform tricks for an audience that never saw his suffering. Ethan's empathy grew. Now the silence in that place seemed deafening. Every piece of that ruined circus told a story of pain, exploitation, and abuse. But more than anything, it told the story of that bear, who was now free but still bore the invisible scars of captivity. Looking around, Ethan noticed the other cages, some of them still holding captive animals, each one seeming to have lost hope. His mind raced. He had to do something for them. The message he had sent to the authorities before losing the signal was out of his control now. He could only hope that it would be received. Ethan picked up his cell phone again, desperately trying to find some signal, but nothing. Desperation began to creep in. He knew time was running out, and those animals couldn't wait. He looked at the bear, which now seemed so human in its pain, and felt a strong urge to act. "I'm going to help you. I'm going to help all of you," Ethan muttered to himself as he walked back to the rusty cages. He tried to open one of the locks, but they were firmly locked. Ethan's heart raced. He knew that, alone, he wouldn't be able to free those animals. Rescue had to come, and fast. As he walked back towards the bear, an idea popped into his head. Perhaps there was a force his way into the cages, or maybe find a tool hidden among the wreckage. He was about to look for something useful when he heard a distant sound, the rumble of engines. Someone was approaching. Help was finally on the way, and Ethan knew that this would be the decisive moment. The abandoned circus, with all its dark secrets, was about to be revealed to the world, and with that, the bear that had led him there would finally get his justice. The sound of the engines intensified, and Ethan felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The story wasn't over yet. Something bigger was to come. The sound of the engines grew, breaking the haunting silence of the abandoned circus. Ethan felt a wave of relief mixed with tension. He ran to the entry point where, in the distance, vehicle lights began to illuminate the forest. The help he desperately needed was finally arriving. Within minutes, several cars pulled up in front of the circus. Out of the vehicles came conservationists and police officers, led by a rescue team specializing in caring for wild animals. Ethan felt the adrenaline rush through his veins as he went to meet them, with the bear by his side, now a symbolic figure in the situation. "Are you Ethan, the man who asked for help?" asked one of the conservationists, a woman with a serious countenance and eyes full of determination. Ethan nodded quickly, taking a deep breath to try to explain everything he had discovered. "Yes, I found this bear, and it brought me here. There are other animals trapped in the cages, and they need to be freed now," he replied urgently, pointing inside the circus. The rescue workers quickly organized the team, spreading out around the site with tools to open the cages and lock the corroded fittings. Ethan, feeling the weight of the moment, joined the group. He helped unlock the cages one by one, finding mistreated animals with desolate looks on their faces, some injured, others so weak they could barely stand up. As the cage doors opened, the animals hesitated to come out. Those who had been imprisoned for so long seemed unable to believe that they were finally free. Ethan watched, his heart squeezed, as the conservationists gently encouraged them to come out, some of them carrying the injured animals with the utmost care. In the background, while the teams worked, the police officers explored the circus, trying to understand what was really going on there. The bleak scene was coming to life. What had once been a place of joyful spectacle had turned into a field of exploitation and pain. "This is bigger than we imagined," commented one of the police officers as he recorded the evidence of mistreatment. Ethan felt the weight of those words. He knew that the abandoned circus was just a front for something darker. While the animals were being removed, the bear who had guided Ethan there stood beside him, as if he were finally seeing the end of an era of suffering. His eyes reflected a different kind of calm now, as if he somehow knew that his mission was accomplished. The team began to take the animals to rescue vehicles, where they would be cared for and rehabilitated. Ethan, exhausted and relieved, watched the operation unfold around him. Deep down, he knew that the story would go beyond that moment. The abandoned circus would be investigated, and the illegal practices of animal exploitation would be revealed to the world. As the last rescue vehicle left, taking the animals to safety, Ethan looked at the bear one last time. The animal needed no words. There was a silent understanding between them, as if they both knew that freedom had been won, but the journey was far from over. Ethan watched as the bear walked back into the forest, now free, but forever marked by the past. The experience transformed Ethan, and he knew that, from that moment on, his life would never be the same. Days had passed since the rescue at the abandoned circus, but the images of that place and the imprisoned animals still echoed in Ethan's mind. He couldn't forget the look in the bear's eyes that had guided him there. That experience had changed something deep inside him. From a simple adventurer in search of tranquility in the forest, he had become someone with a mission, a greater cause. The story of the abandoned circus quickly gained media attention. Newspapers and investigative reports revealed to the public the extent of the illegal animal exploitation practices that had been taking place there for years. The authorities closed the case with the arrest of those formerly responsible for the circus. But Ethan's journey had only just begun. He became an active defender of animal rights, something he had never imagined for his life. The trauma he saw in the eyes of the bear and the other animals made him realize the importance of fighting for the protection of those who had no voice. He began to share his story, telling how an unlikely encounter with a bear led him to discover and denounce a place of cruelty hidden in the heart of the forest. Ethan's talks began to attract attention, and he became increasingly involved with animal protection organizations. He traveled to various parts of the country, taking part in campaigns to raise awareness about the treatment of animals, and used his personal experience as living proof that anyone could make a difference. As for the bear, he became a symbol of hope and resilience. Photographs of that bear walking to freedom were widely shared, and he became an icon of the fight against animal exploitation. Whenever Ethan looked at those images, he felt a mixture of pain and gratitude. Pain for the suffering the bear had gone through, and gratitude for the fate that had brought him together with that creature in such an unexpected way. Even after the rescue, Ethan continued to visit the quiet forest. Every time he walked through it, he felt that the place would never be the same again. He was now deeply committed to protecting the habitat and the beings that lived there. And although he never saw the bear again, Ethan knew deep down that it was there, living out its freedom in the vastness of the forest. Over time, Ethan became a respected voice in the cause of animal rights, but he never forgot that day, that makeshift bridge, the bear's silent gaze, and the circus that held so many secrets. In his heart, he always wondered, what would have happened if he hadn't followed the bear's call? This doubt would stay with him forever, but he also knew that he had made the right decision. And now, as he walked through the forest again, he could feel that the story of his life had been changed forever by that unexpected encounter. If this story has moved you and you want to be part of the fight to protect animals, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss inspiring stories and valuable insights from our channel. We are committed to bringing you videos filled with powerful messages and spreading awareness. Share this story with your friends and family, and together, let's create a stronger community for animal protection. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.